Richard, you're being inducted into the Songwriters Association, Australian Songwriters Association Hall of Fame. What's that mean to you?
A tremendous amount, because songwriting is my life. So I guess to be inducted by your peers is it's a really big deal.
Yeah. You know, you really have been one of the bigger songwriters here in Australia, and you know, I've been a big fan all my life. Where did it start for you?
For me, it started when I was about 14 or 15, and my best friend from school, his older brother, brought back these Bob Dylan albums, and I just remember being mortified when I heard Dylan sing, and then I don't know what age I was, but it was also the first time I had a couple of hits of Scotch whiskey too, and I just had this epiphany, and I just it just went on from there, because once I'd sort of warmed to Dylan, which is a very acquired taste, I just became quite overwhelmed with just the way he was able to communicate with people and the immediacy of his communication and how he could speak to our entire generation. And it got to the point where I got so obsessive that I was, when I was in London, I used to have those record players where, you know, the discs had dropped down as they played, the 12-inch vinyl discs. And I used to put myself to sleep every night with Blonde on Blonde.
Right on.
And so the way I'd get to sleep at night is the second disc 2 had dropped down, and it'd play Sad Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, which I think is about a 16-minute opus. And I guess it just all got into my psyche, and here I am.
Now, I did read your interview in Songwriters Speak, and you know, you talked about your love for Jackson Browne. What did he mean to you?
Well, very, very similarly. I got into Jackson Browne. I mean, there were other writers in between, like Neil Young and After the Gold Rush came before Jackson Browne. But I was really overwhelmed, and still am to this day, with the very first Jackson Browne album and the way that was made. Because I read this really great...
Saturate Before Using.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And even to this day, I mean, I have sort of a mentor now, Philip Mortlock, who's at Albert's Music. And he's sort of mentoring me in a similar way that David Geffen did with Jackson Browne. I just love that story about Jackson Browne being up on Big Bear Mountain, which is where I used to spend a lot of time when I lived in LA. It's about a 2.5-hour drive. I think it's south of LA. And anyway, David Geffen just put Jackson Browne up there, and Geffen had come up, I think it was once every 2 weeks, and say, okay, what do you got for me? And that process went on for about 2 years, apparently. And, you know, Geffen would say, or, you know, that's incredible. And that's how that first album came together. And quite frankly, I think there should be more of it, you know, because what I've found in the 38 years that I've been writing and recording songs is once you put those songs out there, they're going to be there forever. And because my first album, Prussian Blue, was 1972, and now it's sort of got this sort of cult following.
It's hard to believe.
I know, but the cult. The interesting thing about some of my early albums is, like, especially Prussian Blue, because when we released it only sold about 2,500, and yet now I play a lot of gigs, and I get people at an electric rock gig, and they get really obsessive about the song Prussian Blue, you know.
Yep.
So at a very early age, at a very, very early point in my career, I just became aware that, you know, once you've written those songs and put them out there, they're going to be there forever, so they better be good.
They are good. Don't worry about that, Richard.
Thank you.
Like I say, I've been a bit of a fan. I loved everything you did, really. I had Goodbye Tiger and, you know, The Great Escape. And your association with Kirk LaRonge was something special, I felt.
Yes, but Kirk sort of, and that Goodbye Tiger band, in as much as I have an awesome kind of and sacrosanct respect, admiration for that band, it was a bit of a loony bin, to be honest. Yeah, it sort of belongs in that time. You know, I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, I think we toured for about 9 months solid, and it was a bit of a travelling loony bin. However, having said that, I now, when I look back on the album itself and on the tour in retrospect, and the way people relate to it and refer to it, I can now finally see what other people saw from the outside looking in, and I guess all that kind of craziness, also in a positive light, sort of, I don't know, produced real art, I suppose.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. You know, what I was leading to was, you know, your songs are great, and there are so many that I want to ask you about how they came about and whatever. But you know, you used guitar players. This is a guitar magazine, after all said and done, as frontline assault. You know, when the solos you built to a climax. You know, and I was wondering who were the guitar players you liked to listen to. Who impressed you?
Well, currently, I mean, I have two bands currently, and my Melbourne guitar player is Danny Spencer, who's really very young. I mean, Danny's young enough to be my son.
Yes.
And I've got a very special and almost spiritual relationship with Danny. And like, I think Danny's about 26 nowadays. And in Sydney, I play with Dave Leslie from Baby Animals.
Okay.
And Lezo and I have been together for a long time now. I would think pretty much, if it's, say, 15 years since the Baby Animals split up, Dave's been with me since then. Our one, so between this young guy from Melbourne and Dave Leslie and myself, on stage every night, both of those guitar players will do these Clarence White solos. Clarence White's from the Byrds, and I guess also in that sense, I mean, Red McKelvey, who played on Girls in the Avenue and who was my original guitar player, I mean, I was already into the Byrds and Clarence White, but Red was just so into that kind of Clarence kind of picking thing, right. You know. And anyway, it's now a bit of a tongue-in-cheek sort of private in joke on stage, but some nights, I wish I'd recorded some nights, because you hear the guys that play guitar with me now do this Clarence White thing. And which other guitar, I mean, there's so many guitar players I like. We're all sort of huge David Lindley, Ry Cooder fans. Yeah. You know, and the obvious association with Jackson Brown comes about, and so I don't know, with guitar players, there are so many guitar players that I love, but I also, I love little licks, and what I love about hanging out with Dave and Danny, my guitar players, is we have these nights and we sort of, you know, have a few drinks and shit and get into it. And I mean, for example, there's Jerry Garcia, there's about 6 notes that he plays on a Bruce Hornsby track that just, you know, still manages to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up.
Which is what music's about, isn't it?
Which is what it's about. You know? So it's really difficult for me in a brief interview like this to really go through in an encyclopedic sort of fashion all the guitar players that I love, and also
let me go back to Kirk. I really enjoyed his playing.
I knew you. Why did I know you would segue back to Kirk?
Let me go back to George. To Kirk. How did the association come about? Did you headhunt him, or what happened there?
No, as far as I'm aware, it was a very simple story where Kirk emigrated from Canada out to Australia, and he'd only just arrived, and Richard Batchins, who produced my first 6 albums, just hired him to do a session for us. And Kirk and I, the chemistry was just there, and Kirk and I just hit it off immediately. And as you've so rightly sort of described, I mean, for a few years there, Kirk became a really integral part of my sound. I mean, you know, especially on the Goodbye Tiger album, you know, Deep Water, etc. Well, Capricorn Dancer and Lucky Country, I think, are probably my favourite Kirk tracks. Right.
Yeah. You know, I went to school with Kenny Kitching's son, so
I've got
to ask you about Kenny Kitching. How did that association come about?
Well, there again, I mean, Kenny Hitching was just hired to do a session for us, but geez, I think about Kenny all the time. I'm always,
Lovely man.
Oh yeah, most beautiful man, and for my money anyway, one of the greatest steel players in the world, bar none. I mean, Kenny's right up there with Kenny Buttrey and all those great dudes, from Nashville.
Yeah. Richard, what are you most proud of your songs?
I'm most proud of the fact that I'm just chasing this elusive goal, and I guess the reason I'm still alive after the way that I've lived is because I still don't think feel that I've written the song of my life, and as long as I keep chasing that goal, it's a damn good reason to get out of bed in the morning, that's for sure.
Well, I don't want to break your delusion, but you have written some great songs.
Well, thank you.
Hence,
but they've got to get better. They've got to get better.
Oh, they're good. They're good. Well, look, what I was looking for. Which is your favourite song?
Of mine?
Yes.
That's like Sophie's Choice. It's like saying, which of your children do you choose?
Well, line them up.
Line them up. I mean, I like Capricorn Dancer because, and I'm going to play that at these awards tonight, because it's so eminently playable, and it's, I guess also because with that song I managed to, I was trying to write a soundtrack for a movie, and what I like about the chords in Capricorn Dancer is I was trying to capture the essence of the ocean, like the sounds of the ocean, or Frank Zappa had this great saying, movies for your ears, and I was trying to make a little movie for your ears.
Yeah.
And I'm mostly proud of the chords in that song because I think, I don't know, I think it immediately conjures up the ocean.
Oh, I love that song. I learned it.
Did you?
Yeah, I wanted to play it.
Well, have you learnt Lucky Country yet? Cause
I haven't actually learnt Lucky Country.
Because that was... Now, what used to happen in my very early days when I came back to Australia from Europe, and I was really poor, and I'd just sit around with a broken down black and white TV, which, by the way, I learnt later, Kirk and Rogers used to do the same. Just had the sound down on the TV, and you just sit there and you put your fingers on all these different notes.
On something.
And guitar players to this day, it's just a bit of a joke, like it's just a challenge for any guitar player to just play the first couple of chords of Lucky Country, because they are so weird. And nobody can tell me what they are.
What are the words meaning in Lucky Country?
Excuse me?
In Lucky Country, what are the words meaning?
Lucky Country is a very affectionate dig at the Australian psyche and Australians' obsession with materialism, really. And, the middle bit is about my father, who I just felt, at the time that I wrote the song, and especially when I was a teenager, I just felt my father was far too materialistic, bricks and mortar, house, car, family.
Now, he's a doctor.
Yeah. And so but I must underline the word affectionate. It's not a sarcastic song, nor is it cynical, but it is, I don't know, I suppose in a way you could almost say it's satirical about Australian culture and the Australian psyche.
The Great Escape was a great album. There were some great moments on there, and I actually saw you. That was the first time I actually saw you. I think I've only seen you twice. But when you were promoting that album with Harvey on guitar, and gee, the band had some kicking energy.
Oh yeah.
But your bands always did.
Yeah, I mean, regrettably, I've just had really tragic news about Harvey. Harvey is not long for this world, which is very, very profoundly sort of upsetting for me.
Of course.
Because when you're in a band like that, especially in Australia, it's not just camaraderie. You really become a family, and you sort of, at times you go through hell together. Really, you go through heaven and hell. You go through this big roller coaster. And Harvey, who I call Harry, Harry and I went through a lot of times ups and downs for 2 or 3 years there, However, seeing you decided to mention The Great Escape,
I want to talk
to
about
this
it.
day, I still feel it's some of Ian Moss's finest guitar playing. I mean, it's actually really mossy all over that album, but the story behind why Jimmy Barnes and Ian Moss and Don Walker aren't credited is it's a difficult one and might touch a few raw nerves. It was really a decision by their manager, and Mossy and I were really good mates, and we were just hanging out together all the time, and so Ian really wanted to play on that album. And Chisel were in the States. I think they were supporting Ted Nugent, yeah. And Mossy actually came back to Australia early and reclaimed his stake in the Great Escape album, especially I'm an Island, because he'd sort of loved that song since the day I wrote it.
That was Ian Moss. It is a wonderful solo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it gets better. Then, have you heard that other song, "Flow in Motion"?
Yes,
Quite a
yes,
strange
yes,
song.
yes.
And I mean, that's just absolute. That's in terms of art, that's really a piece of art. What he's doing on that, just quite incredible. Well, there you go. You're learning something every day, because Jimmy Barnes and Ian Moss are on about half a dozen of my albums.
Yeah.
As are INXS. I mean, INXS have played on pretty much every album since The Great Escape onwards.
Yeah, I knew you had an association
Yeah.
with those fellows. Yeah. And what was that? How did that come about?
Well, because Chris Murphy, their manager, was I'd known him since my very early days, and I returned from one of my joints in Europe, and when I got back, Chris wanted me to come down and see this band at the Paddington Green Hotel in Sydney.
Yeah.
And they weren't going to go on until 1 a.m, and I was like, I was jet lagged and I really didn't want to go. And the way he was describing the band, it just sounded like a new wave hairdresser band.
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, I'm not dragging myself down to some pub, some ungodly hour. However, I did, because Murphy certainly has the powers of persuasion. And when I got down there was just 9 middle-aged local drunks who were at the Paddington Green Hotel, because it's the only place they could get a drink after midnight. And so I walked in there, and it's just Murphy and me. And I went, and just these old guys sitting at the bar. And half of them were like sort of nodded off anyway. And this band came out, and I'd already been a professional musician for 12 years prior to that night. And they came out and played to nobody, just to Murphy and me, and played with a passion and panache and this, this special quality that band have. And I couldn't believe it, and I just thought, geez, if this was me playing to nobody, I'd be going, and they came out. And then the sequel to that is I saw INXS playing to 25,000 kids in Paris about 10 years after that, and it was still the same band. I mean, so in other words, playing to nobody at the Paddington Green Hotel, they were the same band that played to 25,000.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just opportunity, isn't it?
Yeah.
If the opportunity presents. Richard, you've had an unbelievable career.
Thank you.
You must be so proud of what you've done.
Well, yeah, I'm glad I'm still here.
I'm glad you're still here, and there are a lot of other people that are glad you're still here. I'd like to ask you about your songwriting process, how you go about writing songs. Is it something that you do, or it just falls out of you? Is it something that you actually put into motion, you actually physically get up and make an effort to do it, or it's just something that falls out of you easily?
Well, much like Jerry Garcia, I mean, I write songs because I have to.
Why is that?
I don't know, because I'm just possessed by demons, I think. It's sort of well known that I get very grouchy. I mean, it's very much an addiction. And if I go through a drought with songwriting, it really puts me in a mood. I just have to write all the time.
Even today, you're still
even
writing?
today, and as I said earlier, I've got to chase this elusive goal. Like each song has to be better than the last, sort of thing. But I would think that's got a lot to do with my longevity, like not just my career, but even physically. Because I do have this burning reason to get out of bed every morning, because I don't know, with all the songs I've written, I just think, well, I can still do better. And I quite frankly, I sort of write for myself, which, you know, in my early days caused a bit of friction, and you know, there's a whole long-winded story about Girls in the Avenue, which we don't need to go into here, but I mean...
It's been done over and over, yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I never felt comfortable in the pop scene sort of thing, but having said that, I mean, I've always had very healthy admiration for pop songwriters, the really, you know, the Beach Boys.
Well, people that do
and
things well.
King and, yeah, the really good pop writers. Yes. I think they're great. It's just that I can't do it, you know. Well, I suppose I can, because
I take issue on that with you, because I think Girls on the Avenue was a great song, and you could play it in any situation, and people would say that's a great song.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I believe so.
Amazing what you can do when the record companies right up your ass, you know.
You were forced into that.
Well, let's say it was written under duress, yeah.
But it is a great pop song.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you deserve the the accolade tonight. I'm so pleased when Denny told me that you were being inducted this year into the Songwriters Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
I was very pleased, and I thought, Richard Clapton, and I said to Ted, we got to get an interview, you know, by hook or by crook, we got to do that. So, and I'm in a way I'm overwhelmed. I don't really know where to start with questions, because I want to ask you about so much, you know.
Well, we probably should save this, because I reckon I've got a new album of 15 songs,
yes,
and I won't. I really have to say that the musicians I've used on this album, who are young Australians, are an absolute credit to this whole nation.
Like who?
Danny Spencer, a bass player from Melbourne called Chris Becker, one of my old bass players, Graham Thompson, Michael Barbara's playing keyboards. Danny and I do most of the guitar work on it, but it's when you hear it, you're going to be quite astonished, because it's if I told you these were all kind of the top, and Mick Skelton on drums, that we call Mick Skelton.
Oh, yes.
Well, we call him Skeltner because he's the closest thing you'll ever get to Jim Keltner. Yeah.
No, he is. He's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think you'll find the playing on this album is just astonishing. Well, it's just, it is for me anyway.
What is astonishing about you is your eye for a band. You know, and I remember Ry Cooder saying once, I can't do an album. You just mentioned Jim Keltner. I can do anything without Jim Keltner. You seem to have an eye for great players and a great rhythm section.
Well, I'll second that emotion. I can't do anything without great players either.
Yeah.
You know, it's and it's all part of the process. Yeah, and this new album that I hope will come out in the early part of 2011. I think it's going to be my proudest achievement thus far.